Ever have one of those mornings? Nothing is working. Your brain is toast. You can't even remember how to make toast. Then suddenly, everything comes together and you figure it all out just in the nick of time. Of course, we're not talking about the Pelicans. We don't have time for them today. We're talking about me. We're talking about the NFC South draft review. And of course, we're talking about the Dattitude podcast. And guess what? It's coming up next.
If you're looking for the latest scoop and in-depth interviews on the Saints, the NFL, the Pelicans, LSU, along with the best bets of the week, then lucky you. Along with high-powered, in-the-know guests who cover our teams, Jim Derry brings plenty of Dattitude. And he'll always tell you the way it is, or at least the way he thinks it is.
Where you at, New Orleans? And hello to my friends elsewhere, everywhere, out there who had no trouble getting up this morning and easily figured out how to click on this pod and enjoy yourself for 45, 50 minutes. Who knows how long? Thank God for you. It was a rough one, but we are here, and this is Dattitude, episode number 234 for a Monday, May the 1st, 2024. Mayday, Dattitude incoming. I'm your host, Jim Derry, and whether you are watching on one of our NOLA.com social media channels or listening to the podcast, as always, I thank you for being a part of the show and for being a part of the Dattitude family. As always, if you're watching live, you can be a part of the show by typing your comment or question, whether you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, X/Twitter, whatever you want to call it. We will show it on the screen. And if you're listening after the fact on any number of places, including wherever you get your podcasts on Apple, Google, or Spotify, you can send in a comment, email me, jderry@theadvocate.com. And lastly, a reminder, well, not lastly, but whatever. Friendly reminder to subscribe to our Dattitude YouTube page. It's growing. Gabe Henderson is putting up the shorts in case you want to just get snippets of the show, or you watch it and you want to. What are our favorite snippets of the show? We run shorts on both YouTube and on TikTok. I know a lot of you don't do TikTok. I didn't until recently. It's actually pretty cool. But more importantly, subscribe to Dattitude and click the little bell. You will always find out when we are going live. We've got some comments in the queue. Guess who's here? Jerry, my man. Good morning. We are going to be talking about Saints in the NFC South with my friend Terrin Waack, who is coming on in a little bit. Terrin. Times-Picayune, NOLA.com alum. She used to cover the New Orleans Saints before she moved over to the enemy. Now working for Atlanta Falcons.com, but we still love her. That's why we have her here this morning. We're going to get her take on not just the Falcons, but of course, we're going to talk about Michael Penix and the pick of Michael Penix. She's probably got some insider scoop that we don't know. Maybe we'll feel differently about the Falcons and Michael Penix and their pick of that. Probably not. I mean, they are the Falcons. I don't think we're going to mention 28-3 to her. We can just keep that to ourselves. Never gets old. You could say it whenever you want. You could put it in the comments if you want. I don't know if I'm going to mention it here on the screen, but we're also going to get her take on the entire NFC South. How did the Falcons draft? Did it give any particular team a better chance to overcome the favorites? I don't know. What did she think about the Saints draft? What did you think about the Bucs, the Panthers? We're going to talk about the entire NFC South and their draft. That's all coming up this afternoon. This morning. It's almost afternoon. Feels like afternoon. The Saints did not move up in the odds, but no, they didn't change. Surprising to me, they didn't change on DraftKings. We're going to get to that in a little bit. It was insane morning. I told Gabe before we came on, I was like this close to saying, I'm going to have to postpone the show. When you are so dependent, and I know a lot of us are, we're married to our phones. We can't do anything without our phones. I mean, but I can't do anything without my computer. And when I can't figure out how to make it work, something was going on. I thought, do I have a virus? I couldn't get on the internet. It was going, I would have been talking like this. I would have been glitch. Remember when we had on Christian and we talking about the Pelicans a few weeks ago, and I was like all over the place? It would have been worse than that. I mean, it was bad. So, but we're here. We made it. You're here. We thank you for being here. You're just one of those mornings. I kind of knew it when I got up this morning too. We woke up on the wrong side of, I just wasn't in a good mood. But today, now, I'm in a fine mood. We're all good. Before we get to talking about the Saints, because I'm going to talk a little bit about the Saints before Terrin comes on. She'll be on in about 4 or 5 minutes. I want to tell you a little bit about our friends at Evangeline Securities. We have told you last week and Monday about them. And in case you missed it, we'll ask you this question. Are you a small to mid-sized business owner, and how long have you been in business? Are you thinking at all about selling or retiring? Even if you're just thinking about it and you don't have a clue of how to get started, you'll want to take a look at Evangeline Securities. They are a local business with offices on Poydras Street, right across from the Dome, and in Lafayette. And I spent some time the past few weeks with the managing directors, Nick Braden and Ron Hemel. And I have to say, I was surprised how quickly we hit it off, considering they are Jesuit grads and I'm from the West Bank. If I like them, then I know you will too. They will first talk with you a bit about where you are and your thoughts on the future. They can then run a free, extensive auction process among hand-selected buyers across the world to find a potential buyer. More on them a little later in the show. Visit them at well, how would Buddy D say that? Visit them at www.evangelinesecurities.com and take a deeper look at who Nick and Ron are and more about their company. The odds on the Saints, the odds on the Falcons, the odds on the Bucks. Man, I really thought they would change. I got to say I'm a little surprised, and I don't have them here on the screen, but I'm going to talk about them in a minute. Coming into the show, coming into the week, last week, before the draft, we talked about the Saints, and they are plus 380 to win the division. What does that mean if you don't understand betting? That means basically they're 3.8 to 1 to win the division. Where do you think that ranks? Leave a comment. You think that's too high, too low? I know a lot of Derek Carr haters out there, a lot of DA haters. Well, don't get me started. I've seen so many comments that just aren't going to give this team a chance. But there are people out there who are being positive. And I think you have to be positive going into this season. I think they did so well in the draft. You look at this draft, what grade do you give them? I went on at length about Spencer Rattler. I'm not going to talk about that anymore, but I think it's a solid B+. Where do they stand? Plus 380, 3.8 to 1. The Falcons are actually I don't want to say overwhelming favorites, but they are the clear favorites. They're minus 130, which means they are less than even money to win this division, which I don't understand. We're going to ask Terrin what she thinks in just a minute, but minus 130 means you got to bet $130 to win 100 or $13 to win 10 if you think the Falcons are going to win the division. The Bucks are 3 to 1. The reigning NFC South champions. Why are they so far behind? I don't know. Let's get an expert's opinion. You don't want to hear from me all day. Terrin Waack, you are now the enemy, my friend, but we still love you anyway.
It's funny that I'm going to end up back on like NOLA.com platforms.
I love it. I know you miss New Orleans no matter what.
I could get in trouble for admitting that.
Oh, okay. All right.
I love New Orleans. I was back for Mardi Gras even.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm sure you had a good time. And, we always welcome alums on the show. And you know what? We're supposed to have D. Orlando Ledbetter on a couple weeks ago. It didn't work out, but he's gonna come on soon. But we always welcome viewpoints from other teams. And that's why we have you here today. You see the Saints draft on there. We're going to talk about the Falcons in just a moment. But I want to get your opinion on, obviously, being a beat writer, you're going through this division and you see what everybody did in this division. We're going to talk about the other teams as well. But What is your opinion on what the Saints did in this draft, and obviously going out and get Taliese Fawanga, a tackle that they so desperately needed? This offensive line has it's been in shambles, and this is one big step towards them getting a little bit better.
Yeah, I mean, I still follow the entire Times Picayune beat crew because I can't let it go. But so I've been seeing how the Saints offseason has been going a little bit. I can't say I'm nearly as up to date as I would have been a year ago in New Orleans.
Right.
But taking a tackle in the first round makes perfect sense considering what they only have 2 starters coming back from last year after James Hurst announced his retirement. So I don't hate the pick whatsoever. I haven't done enough research on Felice Fawanga specifically, especially since the Falcons weren't looking at offensive linemen in the first round. But for the Saints, you couldn't have gotten a better setup when it comes to picking a lineman in the first round.
Kool-Aid McKinstry, a cornerback the Saints drafted moved up a few spots to draft. Again, this probably signals the end of the Marshawn Lattimore time here in New Orleans. I know you were here. You covered Marshawn Lattimore. It will be weird watching the Saints defense if that is the case without him. We've seen this before, but could Marshawn Lattimore be a Falcon?
Oh,
my
face gives me away.
Caden Ellis is in Atlanta now. Anyamata's in Atlanta. So it's not, we've seen before Saints leave and go to the enemy. I mean, back in the day, Bobby Hebert left and went, and so it's not an out of the question scenario, but just in general, Marshawn Lattimore, if he's not a part of this team, Kool-Aid McKinstry comes in and he would be a starter right away.
An Alabama boy too. I mean, I went to the great University of, so happy for Kool-Aid to be drafted, especially now that I know I'll be able to see him firsthand in the NFC South twice. But yeah, the cornerback fits considering the Marshawn Lattimore trajectory. But if Marshawn does end up in Atlanta, I don't know how I'm going to feel about that. I know we were debating where's Michael Thomas going to end up, because I know the Falcons needed wide receivers, and I was like, no, not here.
You don't want to deal with that debacle again?
I feel like it's kind of similar with Marshawn. I mean, both of them had their peaks. They're just not there anymore. So
the good news, Terrin, though, we know that Marshawn Lattimore can guard Mike Evans. So,
but he won't talk about it.
No, but he won't talk about it.
But he won't talk about it.
Chris Frank says, like the first 2 picks, but wished the Saints drop down a few picks, maybe pick up a 3rd round pick. We still have extra holes to fill. That's true. That is definitely true. Look, I want to talk about the Falcons here, obviously, this morning. And it's clearly a big deal here in New Orleans because what you guys do affects what happens with us. I thought it was an interesting draft. I mean, we've got to start with Michael Penix. Clearly the story, maybe the story of the first round. The draft's going swimmingly along to all the experts' mocks, picks 1 through 7, almost, chalk by the book. And our 5-hour draft show here on NOLA.com, we were, I got to say, stunned. First, your thoughts on the pick before we get to maybe your insight on what the team's thoughts were.
I mean, initially I too was shocked. But now that we are 6 days removed, I'm less shocked because I've also been hearing about it nonstop for the past 6 days since the pick was made. But yeah, I mean, I understand why everyone was shocked. I mean, the Falcons did sign Kirk Cousins to that 4-year, $180 million contract, making it seem like he is the solution, long-term, short-term, however long they want to have him around in Atlanta. But with Michael Penix Jr. now in the picture, you can see that they are already thinking about the transitional period, whether that is in 4 years, 3 years, 5 years, 6 years, I don't know. That is above my pay grade as to who's going to weave in and out. But I can see why it's the story of the first round. And actually, I have a story coming out on AtlantaFalcons.com today about how the Falcons knew there was a risk that this was going to be the story of the draft, not just the first round. Because, yes, after the first round, obviously the GM and head coach come in, as they do anywhere, to do media. and discuss the pick. Of course, it was talked about Thursday, but then it was talked about Friday, and then it was talked about Saturday, and then it was talked about Monday. So it's not just the story of the first round; it's the story of the draft.
And honestly, I mean, I don't see how we don't go through mini camps and then into training camps and still talk about it. So it's going to be something that you're going to be writing about a lot. And I think obviously once the season starts, we'll probably forget about it a little bit. They'll, game one.
I don't know about that.
Well, maybe not in Atlanta. I mean, but for a guy like the thing that struck me about the pick, not so much, if you want to think about the future, great, but you're talking about a guy that's 24 years old, and it's not like he's 21 and can sit there and learn, and he will learn behind Kirk Cousins. There's no doubt. But I mean, the earliest he's going to start is 2 years from now at the bare minimum. So you're talking about a guy that'll be 26. Not that that's old, but it's sort of strange that this is the guy that they would go draft. I think Michael Penix is fantastic. I think he could be a potential top 10 NFL quarterback someday. But it struck me as odd that this is the guy that they wanted to get instead of maybe a younger quarterback.
Right. And that's a question I still want an answer to, where it's like looking at Penix specifically. Why him? Why not somebody else that was available at number 8 when it came to the quarterback? Like, why Penix? Just forget everything else going on in the situation. This dude. Why this dude? But we'll sure get that answer, and then it'll probably be asked multiple times as the season arrives again too. Like, I'm just prepared for this to continue all the way through to September.
Oh, it'll be asked multiple times you'll be asked multiple times. You'll be out in a bar and people will be asking you about it. It's going to happen forever. Yeah. I mean, you know how this show is going to start. It's just
going to have to wear a wig.
Yeah. I don't know if that'll work or not, but we'll see. Another thing about Penix is it's kind of like if the Saints would have gone out and drafted, I don't know, Latu as a defensive lineman that, yeah, maybe they kind of need him. Maybe he would be great for the future, but that's not what they needed most. To me, the Falcons had so many glaring defensive needs. I like Rukaroro, but I mean, that seemed like a reach too. I mean, so I just thought the top of this draft was very strange for this team that needs, to me, they have enough offensive weapons now. They have Kirk Cousins in there. But to spend this draft pick, why couldn't you move down? I mean, Penix, if you were going to do that, it seems to me you could have moved down maybe 7, 8, 9 spots, still gotten Penix if you really wanted to, and picked up at least another second rounder or maybe even a low-tier first rounder.
Right, and I think that is one of the main issues fans have with the pick, is they could have gotten more out of it. But at the same time, I wasn't in the war room. I don't know the conversations that were being had on the phone. Maybe somebody else was going to take him soon after, where it's like, we don't want to risk going back down. But when you bring up like the defensive needs, I mean, I'm still shocked that they didn't draft a cornerback. I mean, you got Kool-Aid McKinstry over there, Terrion Arnold, both Alabama boys, but they were in my mock drafts. And when it came to, I know Terry Fontenot was talking about how they really tried hard to trade back into the first, and he said even it could have been a cornerback. I wonder how serious that side comment was, that maybe they did have someone in mind. But even like your comment about Rook or Row. It's going to take me a while. It's going to take me a while. When it came to Rook, I feel like all these were such specific picks. Because like you said, like you're surprised they moved up to get him. But and then Penix being surprised it was so high, that I wonder like what they were hearing, that it made it feel like they had to go with these specific guys in a certain number. But at the same time, I wonder if maybe if they had traded into the first round, if there was a specific cornerback they would have taken later.
I agree. I mean, and
I want to see the notebooks.
Yeah. Don't you wish you could just like be in there once? Just, yeah. I mean, even if they didn't let you record, even if they didn't let you record anything, or just, you come sitting there. They let me, I know this is like way different, but when I was covering the New Orleans Voodoo and the Arena Football League had draft day, they actually let me sit in the war room with Mickey Loomis and Mike New. I couldn't record anything or take notes, but it was pretty cool to see how it works. I would imagine it'd be the same kind of thing.
Right.
How the thought process that's going on. I mean, it is Mickey Loomis. They're not thinking any different. I probably don't act much different in the NFL draft, but just the thought, like you say, the thought process is so interesting. Look, Terry Fontenot wants to make a splash. Raheem Morris, obviously, he's got his finger on the pulse of what this team needs, and I'm sure they were all in lockstep with these picks. Whatever. I mean, I guess if you're a fan, you got to trust this new set of management, right? I mean, you went through 3 years of hell with Arthur Smith, and now you got a coach that, look, he's already had a chance. He gets to come in and have a second chance. You got to trust that he's doing what he thinks is right for this team.
Yeah, and the energy is so different around the building that I am curious when, again, September, week 1 rolls around, how that translates into results. Because you can be as happy as you want beforehand and love the decisions that have been made, but none of it matters if there's not the production on the field.
No doubt about it.
That's what this is. It's a game. You got to put up the numbers. You got to win games in order to have the chance for championships and ultimately keep your job.
No doubt about that. Jim Derry here this morning with Terrin Waack of AtlantaFalcons.com talking about the Falcons and the NFC South. We're going to get to the other teams in the NFC South in just a minute, and we're going to talk about where we think the hierarchy is in this division, if anything's changed since the draft, if it changes anyone's opinion on who the favorite should be and all those things here on the Dattitude podcast, brought to you by Evangeline Securities on this Wednesday morning. May Day is May the 1st. Some of the other picks that we see here, and the Falcons had one more pick than everyone else in the division, which is why I had to tighten that down there. It was a little tight. I needed to put the schools there for the two at the bottom. But is there any pick that sticks out to you that you really like and says, this guy's going to find a way to make this team, or this is a really great value pick, whether it's Braylon Trice at 3 or one of the guys at the bottom?
I know they are very, very excited about JT Bertrand. Can't say that I know exactly why, but they are very excited about him. Personally, my college roots are coming through. I was a little bit surprised by Jace McClellan. Not that I'm against it. I'm surprised by it because they did get Bijan Robinson last year. They have Tyler Algier back. They did lose Cordero Patterson, but surprised it's coming through a draft. No qualms with it, though, personally.
I just don't think
a little bit surprised.
You talk about that, and I'll tell you this. One thing, I don't think you can ever have enough running backs, Terrin. One thing the Saints didn't do in the draft that I thought, and it's another reason why I kind of dropped it. I thought after the first 2 days, they were at an A, and I dropped it to a B or a B plus because I really don't like the Spencer Rattler pick. That's a whole different story. But they didn't.
I'm curious about
that. I just don't get it. But they didn't get a running back. And I thought that this team, the Saints, really need a running back. I'm going to go back to it real quick. But, you see what they got here. Great. Bub Means, I like that pick. I like the Jalen Ford pick. But I don't understand why, even if it's a guy that would come in and just have a chance to make the team or be a practice squad, be someone. I just don't think the Saints have enough running backs in this room. There's so much uncertainty. Alvin Kamara is 29 years old. You covered him for long enough. Kendra Miller, he was hurt half the year last year. We don't really know what he can do. And then Jamal Williams was kind of a disappointment. So that's one thing the Falcons did that the Saints didn't do. So I just don't think you can have enough of those guys in the room.
Yeah, I think that's fair, especially since they did lose Cordero Patterson to free agency. I guess the lack of secondary picks is just why I'm why add there? Why add more offense or 3 defensive tackles when you could have added to the secondary? But when questioned about that, Terry Fontenot was confident that they're going to get somebody. They also named the fact that they had signed 2 free agents. You have Antonio Hamilton, who has a starting history,
right?
A little bit older, but still a starter. And then you have Kevin King, who I am really curious how he's going to come back given the 2 years off. He performed well before he took, 2020, 2022 off for
Right,
personal
yeah.
reasons, and then 2023 off for an injury. So I'm curious how he's going to bounce back and whether he'll be in top shape and top performance, or if there is going to be a fall off. So it's a little risky there, but at the same time, like, everywhere is technically hit, and that's where I can kind of understand this idea of looking toward the future.
We're going to come back to the Falcons, but I do briefly want to go through the other two teams because I do want to talk about this division and your thoughts on the division as a whole. Let's talk about the Bucs real quick. They went out and got a guard. There's no question they needed offensive line help, especially on the interior. I thought that was a great pick for them. Actually, I think the Bucs did very well in the draft, filling needs. I really like Bucky Irving. I think he's a guy that, look, the Bucs have not been able to run the football very well. There's no question about that. So I think that's a great pick for them. What stood out for you from Tampa Bay?
Oh gosh. So truth be told, I haven't really looked at the other
Well,
draft
Chris
classes
Braswell, you
because
should
I've
know
been
him.
So yes, I mean, look at SEC. It's just all over the NFC South.
Exactly. It makes sense, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. But looking at it now.
But just in your covering the team, you see the Bucs twice a year, and you have for quite a while now. I think that their interior offensive line play has been a little suspect, and that's why if I were a Bucs fan, it's not sexy. It's kind of like Fawanga for the Saints. You didn't get some great skill player, but I think Graham Barton can come in and start right away and fill a need that they have.
Yeah, but like you said, it's not sexy.
It's
I
not.
feel like that's how, like, it's alignment. Like, they are necessary human beings, and they may be one of the more important positions, but nobody gets excited about it when it comes to the draft itself.
They really don't.
But that's a good pick for them.
Yeah, and we're talking about a team that's coming off of a division title. Now, 9-8 and having to squeak out a tiebreaker doesn't mean you're like this juggernaut or anything, but you re-signed your quarterback, and who knows? The Panthers, look, I didn't get what they did at all. I mean, we can joke about Michael Penix or whatever, but to me, moving up that one spot to get Xavier Legette, I don't understand that at all. I really don't. Now, I like the Jonathan Brooks pick. They need help at running back as well, but man, this is a team that I thought was going to be a little bit more in the running. They got two skill players right off the bat, but I just think they need more help offensively, and I don't get it.
Yeah. With the Panthers draft, I think I was more intrigued by the entire, like, the restaurant / bar that put a sign up that said, let the GM and head coach pick.
Right.
I thought that was hilarious. I'd been to that place multiple times. So maybe this is a sign that they didn't listen to the sign. I don't know.
It's a sign of something. I don't know what. Gabe says moving up to get Legette in the first round gives them an extra year of team control. That's fine. But to me, that having the first pick of the second round is so valuable because what this team needed, in my opinion, was more picks. And I think that if they would have had that, it's moving up one spot to get an extra year of control or getting maybe an extra bottom second round, third round pick, and maybe a later round pick, I think would have been more important for this team. All right. I want to go back I'm going to put the Falcons back on the screen because I want to get your thoughts on the division as a whole. I know you probably don't spend a lot of time in the whole world of betting odds, but the Vegas odds makers have the Falcons at, I think you heard me say this, probably minus 130, which means they are less than even money to win this division. And you look at the other teams, the Bucs are plus 300, which means they're 3-1. The Saints are almost 4-1, and the Panthers, I don't know, they're like, we forget about them. They're like 13 or 14-1.
Literally.
Does it surprise you that the Falcons, just because the addition of Kirk Cousins, and you could say, okay, they got a new coach that changes things too. But does it surprise you that they are that big of a favorite in this division? Again, considering how tight it was, the Bucs again coming off, I think they're improved, and now they've got their quarterback. They're set on their quarterback. Mike Evans is coming back, and a lot of guys are coming back. They do lose a little bit on defense, and then the Saints, we don't know what they're going to be yet. But does it surprise you that they're that big of a favorite?
Not really, because I think back to the NFL Combine, and like we did Radio Row. My coworker Tori McElhaney and I hosted a bunch of national analysts too to get their opinion on who the Falcons should draft. Somebody even said quarterback in round 1. Just saying. So
yeah, that's
somebody
true.
had an idea, but I wish I could give credit where credit is due, but I can't remember who.
Ian Rappaport was talking about it before. He said it earlier in the day. And then when he came on, we were doing the live show and they were talking about it. And I had the TV on here, but I thought he was just blowing smoke. And if anything, again, they're going to drop down. But look, Atlanta goes from having no quarterbacks to having two in a real hurry, but you can only play one. I think it's going to be interesting to see how Kirk Cousins reacts to all this. Will he just let it go? Will he go into camp? But he's already got to feel shunned going into this thing. Poor Kirk Cousins. He's had some, I don't know, misfortunes throughout his career. Someone made a joke, by the way, Terrin. I got to throw this out there. Maybe if the Falcons do win the division, make the playoffs, if it's a day game, Kirk Cousins can start. If it's a primetime game, they can throw Michael Penix in there. Sorry, I had to do it.
Oh man, that just reminds me of like the Andy Dalton story I wrote for the Times-Picayune.
Yeah,
where he just was absolutely terrible in primetime games, night games. Really, and I remember one of my leads was the Red Rifle doesn't fire well at night.
Yeah, he wasn't real good against the Cardinals, was he? On that was the Thursday night game. Yeah, that was. Yeah. Were you in the desert for that one?
Yes.
Yeah, that was brutal. Nice trip to Phoenix for that.
Throwback mem.
But do you think that? Here's my thing about. Okay, I think the Falcons should be the favorite. I don't have any qualms with that. I just think that the distance that the odds makers, what do they know that we don't know? I mean, they usually know something we don't know. I just think that there's such a big gap in these odds. It's not something we saw last year that when it went into the season, it was the Saints and the Falcons and the Bucs were kind of about where they are now. And I understood it then. And neither the Saints nor the Falcons won the division, obviously. But I just think that gap is so big. I don't think that it's better than even money that the Falcons win the division.
I don't know what they know that I don't know. I'm also not allowed to gamble, so this is not me supporting gambling. Putting that disclaimer out there.
Yeah, and these are by the way, I want to make this clear for everyone out there. This is not necessarily about betting. I know. I'm just talking about the gap. When you're looking at odds and you're trying to figure out who's going to win, I mean, I'm not advocating whether you should go bet on it or whatever. I'm just saying that I just think that these odds are interesting, and I don't get the 3-1 and 4-1 as opposed to better than worse than even money.
Right. Well, going back to the combine, I got derailed. A lot of national analysts were saying like the Falcons are just one position away, the quarterback, from being very good. From turning that corner of being 7-10 for the past 3 seasons to playoffs, potentially. And so now they have that guy. They got Kirk Cousins, and that's why they're in win now mode, as they keep saying. Right. So I think maybe that's why they're the favorite, rather than it being a close thing. I mean, it's still the NFC South that I'm like, who really is the favorite? But I don't know. I think if Kirk can plug and play and the offense can operate efficiently, I do understand why they're the favorite. Because I think back to last season, and it's like the entire starting offensive line is back, and they did well. There's Bijan Robinson, who is performing well. Tyler Algier. The bowling ball was doing very well. You have Drake London. Kyle Pitts is now going to be healthier. They just brought in a bunch of wide receivers that I'll be curious to see how they fit. But the offense literally was just the quarterback away. And it was a struggle rotating between Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heineke. And then even before that, Marcus Mariota and Desmond Ridder. So seeing what they've gone through since Matt Ryan, I can understand the pick. But I also understand them bringing in Kirk Cousins because they want to be in that win now mode, especially with Raheem. I feel like they're building both. They're wanting win now mode, but then they have Raheem for long-term future, ideally. That it's like old and new. It's like mix of like trying to blend the two worlds.
We're going to miss Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heineke here in New Orleans. I'm just saying. It's definitely going to be different. 2 more questions before I let you go. First is if you have, and I know fantasy football is not your thing either, but I'm gonna ask you now that Kirk Cousins is here, how much does it improve the stock of? Well, Bijan Robinson we know is going to be much better because Raheem Morris is going to, and this new offense, they're going to lean on Bijan Robinson. He's going to be, to me, be a stud. But how much has improved the stock of Drake London, and especially Kyle Pitts? That's the one I'm most curious about.
Yeah, Kyle Pitts, I'm especially given the fact that they just picked up his fifth-year option. I think faith is very high that he can return to his peak form from like rookie year before his injury. It was a question all last year whether or not he was 100%.
Right.
But I think now, because during training camp, he was not. He was recovering still and whatnot. Whether it came to the season, there was never a firm yes or no answer. I feel like it bopped back and forth depending on the game. But now with, and how he was feeling, and which is fair because you are recovering from a major injury. But now with a preseason, fully healthy, and going into training camp, regular season, oh, got to sneeze.
Go for it.
But I don't know. I'm going to scare everyone. But I think Kyle in this year, his fourth year, yeah, because he has his fifth year coming up. Yeah.
Yep.
My numbers are all messed up after like lack of sleep.
I hear you.
But I think Kyle Pitts will be able to take off. And I'm curious how the ball will be distributed because, like you named them, there's Drake London, there's Kyle Pitts, there's Bijan Robinson, like offensive weapons. And now Kirk is ideally going to be another one who can distribute it evenly.
And a pretty decent offensive line to go with that as well. We'll wrap it up with this. Excuse me. Raheem Morris, what is your just general sense of how he's come in and just the overall, the fans view of him? Now, look, if I were an Atlanta Falcons fan, which obviously I'm not, but if I were an Atlanta Falcons fan, I'd be giddy, if for no other reason that anything's got to be better than what they had. But I like the way that he's come in. He certainly doesn't lack for confidence, but it's a quiet confidence. And I think what Raheem Morris brings to this team is certainly brings them to a different level. What's your general perspective of what you've seen so far?
I think I said it earlier, with the energy in the building is just different because I'm able to be there being the in-house reporter, that I can be there on days that media is not. And it's just a completely different vibe. Raheem, I even call him Raw on a regular basis now, like, whoa. But Raw will like walk around, he'll swing by the digital where we are when it comes to like workspace and just say hi, check in, how's it going? I know, like, who was it? A player was just talking about it. Jesse Bates was saying when Raheem was hired, he tried calling Jesse, but Jesse didn't recognize the number. So I think it was still a Tampa number.
Right.
And so he didn't answer. But then Jimmy Lake called and he answered. But Ra and Jimmy were together. And Ra was over here like, not going to answer your head coach calling? Like, what the heck, Jesse? And he just has such an energy about him. I know, like, in the middle of talking about all the Penix stuff on the last day of the draft, he goes, we drafted a Georgia guy. Come on now. Like, we don't want to talk about that. And so, like, he's aware of his surroundings so well and able to take things seriously, but also lightly. With that huge caveat of, let's see if the results are there. That's my hindrance. I'm like, yeah.
Well, I can't imagine what it was like last year, especially towards the end of that year and that last game. Oh, I can't.
So you'll enjoy this. I was still in New Orleans. I stayed, like, after the game, I stayed 2-3 extra days to visit old friends.
Uh-huh.
And so when the Falcons and Arthur Smith parted ways, I was like, well, I'm eating beignets at Café du Monde.
Let's celebrate with beignets. What other better way is that?
It was oddly poetic, but also, like, I was stressed that I should be in Atlanta.
Well, I will say this. Saints fans probably don't want to hear this, but it's true. I don't think that it could be any worse. I think the future is only going up for the Atlanta Falcons. I don't know if they're going to win the division or not, but I do honestly believe, I think this division is going to be better this year overall. I think it's going to be, I don't think 9-8 is going to win it. And I know I said that last year, but I truly believe, I think minimum 10 wins to win this division this year. So we'll see if that's true or not.
Yeah, it'd be nice to at least be better than last year. Where, like, you're going to the final week being like, there's a 3-way tie, or like if somebody wins and somebody loses and you're just waiting.
I will take a 3-way tie going into the last week. That would make things interesting. Let's make things interesting at least. Maybe we'll get a Saints Falcons finale and it means something. We'll see.
It could have meant something, but then the Bucs won.
Coulda, woulda, shoulda. That's where we are. Terrin Waack, thank you so much for joining the Dattitude podcast this morning.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be back. Talk
to you soon, I hope. Terrin Waack here on the Dattitude podcast this Wednesday morning. I keep forgetting what day it is. It's Wednesday. I tell you, it was a crazy morning. Wednesday here. Dattitude presented to you by Evangeline Securities. Look, I don't think there's any doubt that the Falcons we can make fun of their draft. And if you want to grade their draft, in my opinion, they get, at best, it's a C. It might be worse than that. It might be a C- or a D+. I don't think it was that great. But the fact that their offense is that much better, are they going to be able to stop anybody? I don't know. I mean, Raheem Morris is like DA in a way that he is a defensive mastermind. I don't think there's any doubting that. How much will he lean on his offensive coaches? I think you're going to see Dennis Allen. There's no question. I think that these changes that he's made, and, people joke on social media about Dennis Allen, just get out of the way. I don't think Dennis Allen got in the way of the offense. I think there were times actually where I think he was too passive. I think he needed to get in there and say, we're running the damn ball, or we're doing this, or we're doing that. I don't think there was enough of that. So I don't think that Dennis Allen was injecting himself into the offensive game plan. I'm sure he was a part of it, like even any defensive coach, but I think maybe he finds a balance better. Got to get that locker room on his side. And the thing that scares you if you're a Saints fan about Dennis Allen is if things go south early. That's why, to me, it's super important. The schedule's coming out in, a week or two. When the schedule comes out, I think it's important that the Saints have an easier start than I'd rather see them have a tough finish and an easier start, because I think this team needs to get wins under their belt. You could say that about any year, but I think this team, this season, this team in particular, you got to go to Dallas. You got to go to Kansas City. You don't want either one of those, to me, in the first 5-6 games of the season. Save that for later, because I think this team does need to get out to like a 4-2 start. I think success breeds more success. It sounds silly to say, but it's true. You don't have to talk about a locker room problem if you're winning games. Everyone's going to be happy. But if this team struggles out of the gate and gets out to a tough start, we're going to have to talk about the same old things over and over again. Again, I think it depends a lot on how this schedule looks. And we're going to get into the schedule. Look, we're going to be spending a lot of time over the course of the next few weeks and really next couple months. When the schedule comes out, we're going to be talking a lot about it. We're going to be talking about more about these NFC South odds. We're going to be talking about other teams in the league. We're going to be talking about the Taliesin Fuagas and how's this offensive line going to look. There are all sorts of things that we're going to be talking about over the course of the next several weeks before we get into closer to training camp. It's not that far away, folks. 2.5 months. 2.5 months to training camp. We are much closer to the beginning of this coming season than we are to the end of last season. Strange to say. It's hard to believe, but it's true. All right, before we get to the extra point, I'm going to leave that up on the screen. If you were listening earlier, you heard me. By the way, you don't want to miss the extra point today. It's a fun one. If you were listening earlier, you heard me talk about my new friends Nick Braden and Ron Hemeld at Evangeline Securities. We already said we don't hold against them that they're Jesuit grads. All it means is that they are smarter than I am. That's all it means. Nick went to the Wharton School of Business and Ron to the Ross School of Business at the University of Michigan. Me? Well, I'm lucky that LSU and UNO let me visit their campuses for 8 years, but that's a whole nother story. At Evangeline Securities, if you own a small to mid-sized business, they can help you plan for the future and the next chapter of your life. With the offices here in New Orleans and Lafayette, they are close enough for you to visit and sit down with them to talk about how to begin the journey of selling. And in the end, whether you decide to sell or not, there's zero pressure to do so. Whatever you decide, At least you know you will be well informed to help you make that decision. Visit them at evangelionsecurities.com, and by all means, tell them I sent you. That'll get you something. Maybe it'll get you a beignet. I don't know. The extra point, this day in history. It's no longer a Saints draft. After spending 2 weeks looking back on the Saints draft, we're going to go in a different direction this morning here on the extra point. We're going to go to one of my favorite days in my personal baseball memory book. Yes, I am old. May 1st, 1991. It was a doubleheader for baseball historians. It was also a Wednesday. And I don't know. Sometimes I wonder the things that I can remember. I can't remember what I ate for dinner last night, but I could remember this was a Wednesday, sitting on my couch at home back in the day. Still living with my parents, by the way. They couldn't wait to get me out of there. That's a whole different story. There were some day games on this Wednesday, and the day started off with the great Rickey Henderson stealing third base against the New York Yankees. Big deal, you might be saying to yourself. He did that a lot. Well, it was a big deal, a very big deal. It was Henderson's 939th steal in his career, which was a new record in Major League Baseball. And this is what it looked like.
The A's having come from behind a 1-0 deficit. Rickey goes, a pitch taken. He's going to have it. He does. Rickey Henderson, no contest, steals third base, jerks the bag from its moorings, and holds it aloft, representing number 939. Rickey pounds it with his left fist, hands it to equipment manager Frank Sinchek, who gives him a big hug. There's Rickey's mom.
Again, talking about the game being forgotten.
And Lou Brock probably the happiest guy on the field right now. He can finally make his speech, pass over the record to Rickey, and go about his business.
Crazy thing about that steal in that moment was that Rickey Henderson went on to play 12 more seasons after 1991 and finished with 1,406 stolen bases, which is just shy of 500 more than second place Lou Brock, who you saw there come and hug him, and he couldn't wait for that to get over with, by the way. It was a fait accompli that it was going to happen. Even crazier that the closest to Henderson among current players is Starling Marte of the Mets, who will really need to get cranking to beat him, considering he's 35 years old and he is 1,062 stolen bases behind him. Later that evening on May 1st, by the way, Henderson actually was outdone. He was outdone by a 44-year-old unicorn named Nolan Ryan, who was still throwing 92, 93-mile-an-hour fastballs for the Texas Rangers. On that night, he tossed his seventh no-hitter, this one against the Toronto Blue Jays. And, of course, it ended on a strikeout.
In the books. The remarkable Ryan has done it again.
Want to hear something that is more incredible to me than Henderson's distance between first and second and stolen bases, and even between him and the best current players? It is that of all the no-hitters thrown in Major League Baseball history, going all the way back to Joe Borden of the Phillies. Yeah, that Joe Borden. He pitched for the Phillies, the Philadelphia White Stockings of 1875. You remember Joe Borden? I think I saw him play once when I was a kid. Ryan owns 2.2% of all the no-hitters ever thrown in Major League Baseball. That is insanity. 2.2% of every single no-hitter thrown in the history of Major League Baseball, dating back to the late 1800s, were thrown by Nolan Ryan. 1/50th. Amazing. Most of you know that the Ryan Express owns the record for the most strikeouts with 5,714 across his ridiculous 27-year career. But the 7 no-hitters he threw, maybe even more impressive. No doubt about it. All right. That's how you wrap up a show, ladies and gentlemen. At least that's how we do it here on Dattitude. A reminder, there will be no show this Friday. Got some things going on. We will be back on Monday talking about the Saints. Who knows? Maybe my extra point will even be about the Saints. The thing about going back in history in May, there's not a whole lot of history when you're talking about football teams in May and June. So we're going to do some different things on the extra point here coming up. You want to be a part of it. We know you love it. I want to thank today's guest, Terrin Waack, and of course, we thank Gabe Henderson for being behind the scenes and helping out. Again, the shorts on YouTube. Check us out. Also, TikTok. If you do the TikTok thing, check us out on TikTok as well. Reminder to subscribe to our Dattitude YouTube page and click the little bell to receive notifications when we go on the air live. You can subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast, and find a replay of the show on NOLA.com/sports. Kentucky Derby coming up. We didn't even talk about that. You can check out all sorts of Kentucky Derby stuff on bet.nola.com. Who's going to win? I won big last year. I don't know if it's going to happen again. I got a secret inside hookup, and it's not Jeff Duncan. Kentucky Derby. Have a great rest of your week. If you are so inclined, enjoy the remainder of Jazz Fest. Have a glorious weekend. We will see you on Monday. Take it easy, my friends.
If you're looking for the latest scoop and in-depth interviews on the Saints, the NFL, the Pelicans, LSU, along with the best bets of the week, then lucky you. Along with high-powered, in-the-know guests who cover our teams, Jim Derry brings plenty of Dattitude. And he'll always tell you the way it is, or at least the way he thinks it is.